This is yours?
Yes. Did you tell him that you're
Go ahead.
Okay. Dr. David Passig is a futurist, lecturer, and consultant who specializes in technological, social, and educational futures. He holds a PhD degree in future studies from the University of Minnesota and teaches system theories, future methodologies, technological, social, and educational future at the Graduate School of Education at Raison University. He also heads the graduate program in Information and Communication Technologies, as well as the Virtual Reality Lab. Dr. Passig is also the author of the bestsellers 2048 and The Future Code, which consists of 16 predictions regarding economic, social, national security, and national identity trends in Israel's future. Dr. Passig.
Muchas gracias. Nada. Okay. What I would like to do with you, we have about an hour and a half. There's no restrictions today? That's good. All right. So the idea is to give some large perspective to the present. I'm going to divide my talk into 3 parts. The first would be a very brief intro to futures thinking, okay? And then I'm going to give you a very large perspective of the 21st century. And then I'm going to see how it's going to be reflected over here and see what are the challenges that are ahead of the Jewish people in the 21st century. So what we're going to do is a very large scope of future history. You can ask whatever you want, during whatever I'm saying. Don't hesitate. I'm going to shock some of you about a lot of things. So be open, and probably we will not be able to, to cover all of your concerns, but I'll give you some reading materials, and there is a test at the end of the course. Great. All right. So let's just really briefly touch upon what is it futures thinking. People think that there is one future ahead of us, but actually there are infinite futures. And what we are trying to do is to scan those possibilities. We are trying to understand the probabilities of each possibility, okay? And the most important thing, we are trying to figure out what we can do at the present in order either to enhance some positive scenarios or avoid some negative scenarios. This is actually the basic idea of futures thinking. All right? So there are infinite futures that we are trying to develop and craft and understand. And since it's really impossible to be able to scan everything that might happen in the future, we tend to clarify the most probable futures that might happen in order really to see what we can do at the present. So I'm going to speak about the future, but actually I hope you'll understand that no one, really nobody, knows what's going to happen in 10 minutes from now. 5 minutes somehow, 10 minutes from now, impossible. So the whole idea of futures thinking is to understand the present a little bit better. C'est tout. All right? Great. So, how do we do it? Actually, futures thinking is let's say a branch of another field in science, which is called systems thinking. And with a lot of methodologies. We are trying to understand how systems are evolving. And by systems, we mean all kinds of systems, from economic systems to cultural systems to technological systems, etc., etc. The basic assumption of futures thinking is that there is logic how systems are evolving. Now, if you accept that assumption, then you try to understand the logic of systems. And the more you understand the logic, the more you have a way to put that logic into some kind of charts or whatever. You try to understand the vector of that logic. So this is basically futures thinking. We're doing it with a lot of methodologies. I don't have time here to cover methodologies. This is not the idea of this presentation today. What I would like to stress is that the global trends, I'm moving, by the way, to the second part of my talk. It was very brief, the first one. What I would like to stress up front of my talk is that the global trends of the 21st century are going to be very different from the major trends of the Jewish people in the 21st century. Not only very different, but also opposite to global trends. So in order to understand what's going to happen to the Jewish people in the 21st century, we need to see its context, which is a global context, especially nowadays in which globalization is so dominant. Thank you. It's just driving me crazy. Thank you. All right. So let me give you the term that I would like you to take from here today. I'm going to speak about a phenomena that very few at this point are really aware of, and it's going to shape your very personal lives in the 21st century. You probably are going to see the whole 21st century. You will still be around at the end of this century. Okay? You don't know it, but that's another issue. Okay? So, what I would like to present to you is the term which is called the global demographic winter. And what does it mean exactly? Let me give you a perspective, a historical perspective of humanity, really in a very brief, a very short chart. Somebody knows how many people were worldwide about 12,000 years ago? Worldwide. Somebody would like to try? 3. About how many people? About between 1 to 5 million people. Okay? Between 1 to 5 million people. All right? By the way, 60,000 years back, there were about 10,000 people on Earth, like you and me. And step by step, humanity, developed and added more and more and more people. It took us about something like 10,000 years until we reached 2,000 years ago. We reached the 250 million mark. But when we reached that 250 million mark, we started going amok. Okay? It took humanity about 1,800 years to quadruple that number and reach the 1 billion mark. And then it took humanity only about 130 years, okay, to double that number. And then only 30 years to add another billion. And another 50 years, another billion. Another 12 years, another billion, etc. And you see what we call the extrapolation, an amazing extrapolation that humanity has went through in the last 200 years. How many people worldwide at this point? 7 billion. Well, formally we are 7.7 billion people. Okay, not so formally, we tend to say that there are at least another 300 million people that are alive but they are not, listed in any way, in any place. This is a very important group of people. Most of the time when we try to understand, future conflicts, this group of people tends to bring a lot of tension between a lot of groups and wars, etc., etc. You see what all of you are aware of what's happening in Europe, in Mexico, in Israel, etc., etc. I'm not going to speak about future wars, okay? I have a whole book that is dedicated to it, so if you wish, I'll give you references to it. How many people will be worldwide by mid-21st century? What do you think?
9 billion.
10.
Guess, don't worry. How many?
14 billion.
14 billion. Oh, somebody is really active. Okay, so at this point, the estimates are that by 2050 there will be about 9.7 billion people, which is a phenomena, historical phenomena, because it will take humanity only 250 years to go from 1 billion to about 10 billion. And just think about the pros and cons. We don't have time now to elaborate. What is really interesting is how many people will be worldwide by the end of the 21st century. Now this number a lot of people are aware of. Very few people are really aware of what's going to happen by the end of the 21st century. Somebody would like to try? How many people worldwide will be by the end of the 21st century? Worldwide? Go ahead. 12.5.
14.
14, all right. So what I'm going to show you is the highest estimate and the lowest estimate, okay? Probably will be moving, in between, all right? Take a look. At best, humanity is going to grow to 11 billion people, which means the second half of the 21st century we are barely going to, add something. This is global, okay? And there is a lot of evidence that humanity can shrink back to 6 or 7 billion people. Okay, the reliability of those numbers is about 80%, which means if this is what's going to happen in the 21st century, that means the 21st century is going to be totally different than the 20th century. How exactly different? This is, the domain of a very large literature. Okay, economically, sociologically, technologically, all the 21st century is laid out in this very simple chart. Okay? Now, actually what really shapes our life is not the numbers. It's the reasons that are behind the numbers. So I'll give you just, some hints just to back up that very interesting phenomena, which is called the global demographic winter. For example, at this point in time, nowadays, today, for every 100 females, there are about 117 males. Okay, at this very specific group that is really pointing to the future. Now, as far as we know, this is a phenomenon in history. We have a list of 10 reasons why it's happening, but it doesn't explain the phenomenon. All right? But this is something very unusual in human history. How is it going to play out? It's not an easy thing to understand, but we're trying to understand. What does it mean 17% without the biological horizon? Where is that energy going to dissipate? It will dissipate somewhere, right? Now, another reason, okay, for example, if you wish to really understand the driving force, this is the term that we use most of the time in trying to understand those kind of trends. For example, in Israel, nowadays, there are already 5% more males than females at that age group. What does it mean? How it's going to shape family structures? How is it going to shape, careers? What kind of technologies are going to be really very well accepted in societies, etc., etc. These are the kinds of things we're trying to understand. Go ahead.
But can't this number be like very easily take like a big hit if Israel has a war or different like threats?
Those kind
like
of
that?
trends take a lot of time to mature and to develop, unless, God forbid, something unusual will happen. Okay, we are not speaking about those kind of scenarios. We are speaking about a probable scenario with 80% chance. Yeah.
Also, how do you consider the LGBTQ population within these numbers,
No.
and specifically like queering of gender?
Okay, this is probably one of the driving forces that are shaping those kind of if you wish trends. All right. Somebody else? Go ahead.
Are we saying that this imbalance is one of the 10 reasons why our population is then
Yes.
going to shrink?
Exactly. Just one. I'm giving you just one simple reason. I'll give you another reason. Okay. We found that for millennia there were more miscarriages of boys than females, than girls. So during history, there were more females than males. Nowadays, with technology and medicine, etc., we're able to, to stop those kind of miscarriages, and the balance between, or the ratio between genders has shifted. We will take care of it when we will all be aware of the consequences of those kind of things. We'll try to manage it, but it will take another 50 years. 50 years. That's my scope of history. I would like to understand how things are going to evolve. I'll leave the next half a century for my kids to take care of. Go ahead.
So because there was always an uneven balance, but just it was previously more females than males, isn't that what you're saying, that in the past there had been more females than males? So even though like the balance is switching, how would that like drastically affect the population?
Well, think about family structures that is going to shift. Think about the economic consequences. For example, there are very specific products that are more female-oriented than male-oriented. If there are more males, then what kind of industries are going to flourish? Okay, you see how we work? We are trying to deduct exactly the types of products that males will be needing. Okay, and that way we try to see how careers are going to shift, etc., etc. It has a great impact. Okay, by the way, this variable is called the faith variable of humankind. Our destiny is shaped by the demography in which we are immersed. Everything that that is happening to us depends on demography. Okay, with whom we're going to share our lives, how many kids we're going to have, what kind of melodies those kids are going to have. Everything is shaped from the demographies that we are immersed in. Take a look at this. Somebody knows what country is this? This is Jordan, okay? They have already 160 more males than females. Take a look on this one. What country is this? Saudi Arabia. Take a look. 20% more males than females. By the way, one of the reasons is the technology. Which technology? A simple technology has shaped the
IVF.
fate. No, a much simpler one. What? No. 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 Ultrasound. A very simple technology has shaped the history of this region. By the way, not only of this region, the world, the entire world has been affected by this phenomena. Why? Because if you have 20% more males than females, what do? If it's only 5%, society somehow can manage. If you're a leader and you see that ratio, everybody is looking at you. What can you do in order to balance, to react to that kind of stress? This is a very stressful phenomenon socially. So we are trying, of course, to understand. I'll give you just one thing that they have done, and they brought havoc worldwide. This is what we call madrasas, okay? Religious schools that the Saudis are having all over the Arab and Muslim world. You know, most of those schools are for boys, not for girls, and it's an energy they are trying already 30-40 years to manage. This is a frightening energy for leaders in this region. So what should they do? What they were thinking, what should they do? And what, establishing universities for them? It will be disastrous for those kind of people in different regions. So what they found as a policy 30-40 years ago to do is to invest or pour billions of dollars to those kind of religious schools in order to somehow manage that energy, bring that energy down as much as possible. The outcome was fundamentalism, and the outcome of fundamentalism is what? Terror. And here you have another explanation to a world phenomena of the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. Okay? It's not just, a religion, but actually it's biology. There are a lot of reasons, but this reason nobody is speaking about. Okay, just the ratio between genders. Go ahead.
So, is the assumption that leaders are working with is that excess male energy is fundamentally dangerous?
Of course.
Floating around.
Of course. ISIS, most of them are males. Most of them are very, energetic. Some people are going to Europe, and most of the immigrants to Europe are males. Because there is nowadays it's very hard to find a spouse in the Muslim world. And one of the outcomes of this phenomena is that in a lot of places, people are 40, 50 years old are taking 10 and 12 year old girls as their spouses. A frightening phenomena. This is one of the outcomes. Okay? And a lot of other things I don't want to touch upon how it's going to affect conflict. I'm just trying to understand, the largest picture. Anything else? Another question? Go ahead.
Just the 100-20-100, that's from 40 years ago, or that's...
No, it's already now,
Current.
but it's already 40 years. The reason it's happening there is that it's because in their culture, it is crucial to have a baby boy as the elder. Because in our culture, we are named upon our fathers. For example, Itzkovich, Simchovich, okay, Ben David, Ben Chaim. In that culture, they are called upon their firstborn boy, like Abu Mazen, okay, Abu Omar. Who was Abu Omar? Arafat, okay. Everybody is being called upon their first boy, baby boy, first boy. Go ahead.
Wait, I'm still confused about these schools and redirecting energy. So are these kids celibate, or what is the purpose of these schools? I'm still confused on that.
To organize that energy and give them some sense of let's say future, okay?
Because they're not getting married.
They are not going to be with a female in their life cycle.
Why? Just because there's not enough?
There's not enough.
There are extra billions.
Oh, it was not clear. I was so. I assumed it's so clear. Okay, think about
I understand.
boys without girls. I don't have to explain to you guys. Okay. Males are a barbaric gender. Thank God we have girls, because you tend to bring that energy down. It doesn't matter who you are outside. Outside, if you want do the dishes, you're in trouble. So this is a very important phenomenon. All right. So let's take a look now at Jewish history. I'm still trying to explain, the what we call the mega trend of the 21st century. Everything derives from this. I hope you understand. From economies to conflicts to everything is derived from demographies. Yes.
So when you're talking about Israeli society, are you including the Arab population that are Israeli citizens, or specifically Jewish?
We'll speak about it in a moment. Everything. Okay? So let's give some historical sense, perspective to Jewish people. Because I don't know why you were born here at this point in history. Okay, not here, but at this point in history. And if without understanding historical perspective, you might really don't understand what's happening. So this is the reason I'm trying to stress this part in my presentation. How many Jews were in this region about 3,000 years ago? 3,000 years ago, it's exactly the time of King David. 3,000 years ago, how many people were here? How many Jews? We were called at that time Hebrews, not Jews.
2,000.
Can you try?
2 or 3 million.
2,000 you said? Let's not exaggerate.
2 or 3 million.
2 or 3 million. Okay, it depends who you ask. That's how Jewish are, Jewish people, yeah. Anyway, as far as we understand from a scientific point of view, there were about 300,000 people, about 3,000 years ago. Okay, Ir David. Okay, you've been in Ir David? You've been in Ir David? Not yet? Okay, Ir David. You know what's Ir David?
Yes.
Okay, of course. It's DC. It's not Washington DC, it's Jerusalem DC. At best there were 3,000 people at 3,000 years ago. Alright? That was 3,000 years ago. Now let's go forward in time. How many people, how many Jews worldwide were in the 12th, 13th century? Worldwide. A very important time in Jewish history.
800.
It's called the golden era in Jewish history. Okay? So, how many people? Try. I'm using what we call a pedagogical trick. I'm asking a question. I know you don't know the answer, but when you hear the answer, it will stick in your mind. All right? So, what do you think? How many people worldwide? How many Jews worldwide?
800,000.
800,000. All right. That's right. You tried. That's
I
good.
tried.
Okay. We are speaking about 1 million people.
I was close.
All right. Now, be with me here for a second. Be with me here. As far as we know, out of those 1 million Jews worldwide, about 700,000 lived in Spain. About 70% of all Jewry was in Spain. That's the reason it's called the Golden Era. All right? And then 500 years ago, there was the Spanish
Inquisition.
No, not the Inquisition. The Spanish expulsion. Okay? As far as we know, about 300,000 people, Jews, went out from Spain, and about 400,000 remained in Spain and Portugal, and they actually stopped being Jewish. Okay, nowadays there is a movement that some of them are trying to look after their ancestry, and they have some kind of wish to be part again of the Jewish people. So that's 500 years ago. Let's go forward. How many Jews were worldwide about 200 years ago? 200 years ago, how many Jews worldwide? 7 million. Not bad. Okay, here's the number. About 3 million. All right. Well, we always did more noise than we were, in numbers. All right. That was then 200 years ago. How many Jews were before World War II?
12 million.
12 million.
16.
Oh my God.
14.
Oh my God.
8 million.
I hope
9
you
million.
understand
9
it's a very important number to know. It's part of our identity nowadays. It's not
18
history.
million. 18 million.
15 million.
Good. About 18 million. All right? Between 17 to 18 million. And then came the Holocaust. We lost about half of European Jewry and about a third of world Jewry. And we remained with, after World War II, how many Jews were worldwide? Between 11 to 12. Okay? Fine? Now, I'm going to say something unusual. Alright? If I were a futurist in 1930, okay, Hitler did not take office yet. When did he take office? 33, January 33, okay? And I see the numbers, okay? Take a look, sixfold. Now, I don't think there is someone that could have imagined the Holocaust because of that. Because it's really a frightening phenomenon. So many people in a very, in a matter of what, 100 years, frightening. But I would probably be able to foresee pogroms. There is no system that can sustain such a growth without doing, something, without reacting to that growth. That's a natural phenomenon of any system. All right? And of course, the Holocaust came. Nobody could have imagined that kind of thing. By the way, if you really want to understand 2019, bear with me with the next two figures. If you really want to understand the present in Jewish history, take a look at this. Okay, how many Jews now? You see? Worldwide, 14.7. We barely recovered. We have just started recovering from the Holocaust. And that's why a lot of things is happening in our history. That's why a lot of people are accusing Israel being aggressive. That aggressiveness is coming from that fear that something might happen again. Okay? But if you really want to understand what's happening now, take a look at this figure. Can you read? Is it clear?
We can't see.
You can see? How many Jews would have been worldwide now? Okay? If there was no Holocaust and there was a Jewish state. How many Jews would have been in 2019 if there was no Holocaust and there was Israel?
27 million.
24 million.
24 million. Okay. The scholar that is doing those numbers is called Anita Shapira from Tel Aviv University with a lot of reliability. She speaks about at least this.
Oh, I got close. I said 30.
34 million Jews would have been now if there was no Holocaust.
Pretty useless.
Also, this is huge. This is really, heavy on our subconsciousness.
Where would they have been?
In Tel Aviv at the beach. All right, take a look at another figure. How many Jews would have been now worldwide if there was a Holocaust and there was no Jewish state?
24,000.
24
million. Sorry.
24 million.
Wait.
No, not yet.
Okay,
Oh, what
think,
would have happened?
think,
Oh,
think,
wait.
think,
I read it
think.
wrong.
6 million.
The English is right here?
Yeah, that's right. I'm just bad at
6 million.
I was afraid the English is not here.
10 million.
What has happened? So
6 million.
Here's what Anita Shapira is saying.
I was right.
6 to 7 million Jews worldwide.
That's
Which
like
means
half the
Israel was the savior of the Jewish people in the last 70 years. This is the historical context that you were born in. What does it mean? Does it have any significance? This is what I'm trying to understand. This is what I'm trying to clarify, because the more we understand, first of all, the phenomena, and then the challenges that are going to derive from this phenomena, this is something unusual if we will be able to foresee beforehand what should we do, how it's going to impact everything, etc., etc. And by the way, you are the generation that is going to take further the Jewish history. If you understand the context, it will be much clearer to you. If you want, you will waste a lot of your time doing things that are irrelevant to Jewish history. So, having said that, take a look at this point in Israel. Okay, we said about 14.8 million Jews worldwide, isn't it? However, for the first time, after 2,500 years, the largest Jewish community resides in Israel. About 45%. No, this is wrong. 45% of world Jewry resides in Israel. Okay? The largest Jewish community. It's a threshold that we have passed in the last year or two, and it's going to shape Jewish history. How exactly? I'm going to try and give you some, hints. How? I don't think there is one single person at this point in time that really understands how it's going to shape Jewish history. But from 100 years from now, Judaism is going to be different. Jewish history is going to be different. Okay? Israel is going to be different. American Jewry is everything is going to be different. Just because of this threshold that we have passed these last few years. Okay? In Israel, you see the numbers. 6.7 million Jews. How many in America? In the US? How many Jews in the US? Okay? Would you like to know? Here you have the numbers. Okay? We are now 1 million more Jews in Israel than the US. The largest Jewish community in the last century was in the US. And that's it. It's over. You see, France is about 500,000 people, etc., etc. And it's shrinking constantly. And in Israel, it's going up every year by about 200,000 people. How many Jews will be in Israel by 2050?
You said what, there's 6.7 now?
Now there's 6.7 now.
Okay. My guess is 9 million.
Take a look.
I was gonna guess 12.
Okay?
Wait, 12.
World Jewry is going to reach back the 18 million mark. That means it will take world Jewry a century to recover from the Holocaust. However, during that century, history is going to be reversed. Before World War II, there were about 18 million Jews worldwide. 12 million were in Europe. By mid-21st century, 18 million Jews worldwide, 12 million Jews in Israel. In a matter of 1 century, Jewish history of 2,500 years is going to be reversed. and it has to have a significance. It's going to have a great impact on everything. Go ahead.
So is this suggesting that a lot of Jews in other countries are going to be moving to Israel?
Some of them.
Because
Not a lot.
if you're saying 12 million Jews, but there's 18 million worldwide, that only leaves for 6 million, and that's
6
basically
million.
what there is in America right now.
That's right. That means world
Jewry is
Jewry
moving
is
to
shrinking.
Israel.
Is shrinking because of immigration to Israel, and most of mostly because of assimilation. What's the rate of assimilation now in the U.S.? Just in the U.S., 62%. That means if you are a Jewish couple and you have less than 2 kids, 1 kid will cease to be Jewish. That's why some people are saying that we are at the midst of another Holocaust. There was a Holocaust of gas chambers. In the 20th century, 21st century, we are at the Holocaust. Some of the scholars call that Holocaust the honey Holocaust. The Holocaust from good life. Okay? However, for the first time, things are shifting, which means that the center of Jewish history is shifting towards Israel after 2,500 years. Why do I mention the 2,500 years? Somebody knows? 2,500 years? Somebody knows why 2,500 years? The destruction of the first temple. Okay? After the destruction of the first temple, we started the 2,500 years of Jewish diaspora. Okay? Are you with me? Are you shocked? A little bit. Okay.
Of this 12 million that you coined, what percentage of that is Caribbean?
Very good question. Why are you afraid? You're afraid. You're concerned. You aren't afraid.
Big fan of the Caribbean, but like just
Okay, great.
She was, so.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this. Okay? I'm going to show you new numbers.
Okay.
Alright? But this is actually something unusual even worldwide, because probably we are going to be the only nation that is going to double its population in a matter of 30 years. The only nation that is going to double its population in a matter of 30 years. So by itself, it's something really unusual. Alright? From 1948 up to now, do you know how far we went? How come we doubled? How did we do exactly in terms of population in Israel? We did actually tenfold from 1948 to 2019. And in a matter of 30 years, we're going to have to build another state. Something we did in 70 years, we're going to have to do it in 30 years. Think about the challenge. Okay, now bear with me. This is much more important. How many Jews would be worldwide at the end of the 21st century, and how many of them will reside in Israel?
25 million.
25 million.
36 million.
36, why not?
20 million in Israel. That's my guess.
I'm going to show you
24
what the
million.
UN are saying. Okay, there is a huge study of the UN. All right, I think it will be more than that, but I'm going to refer to the UN population study. Here's the number:
Oh, what?
24 million Jews worldwide. Out of those 24 million Jews, 20 million Jews in Israel, and 4 million minorities. We are going to be the only country that is going to triple its population in the 21st century. Okay, let's give you some time to ask your questions. Go ahead.
So are these numbers dealing in like an ideal world where there's no surrounding context? Like,
No, this is
how are we going to have 24
this
million?
is what we call a probable future with more than 80% chance.
But it's accounting for things like
A
the
lot of
Arabs
things.
that are here.
A lot of
in
things.
certain
A lot of
countries.
variables.
How?
How?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you
Can
some
you
of them.
go
It's,
PhD?
you see, I cannot, shrink huge literature, but this is what we call the predictive reliability of the numbers. How sure we are that these are going to be the numbers. Go ahead. Let's do eternal.
Two questions. One, I'm sure other people are wondering also why the minorities stop growing between 2050 and 2100. And then the second question, this runs contrary to lots of people who speak about the demographic problem.
Exactly.
Are you
Exactly.
will we be addressing,
Everybody that is speaking about the demographic issue
right?
is not, they are not relying on sound demographic trends. They are speaking from deep fears. It's already it has been the same thing during the last 120 years of the Zionist movement. 120 years, this was the debate. At the beginning, people said, there's no way we can establish here a state. Because who will be coming here? Come on, this is a desert, right? And then every epoch, that was the debate. Still, we are still debating this thing here, but time is in our favor. Remember this, you can quote me. I have some, publications in which I really try to explain it. Go ahead.
What do you think is the maximum capacity of Israel?
There is no maximum capacity.
So easy.
What? By maximum capacity, you should explain what do you mean.
I mean, you said second state, so I assume like there's a number at which point we need a second state. Right?
Okay. In terms of what?
In terms of
Space?
Space.
Space. Okay. Nowadays, there are 400 people on each square kilometer in Israel. Okay? 400. By 2050, there will be 800. By the end of the 21st century, 1,200. All right? Fine? How many people in Manhattan?
A lot.
How many people in Manhattan?
I was in Minnesota.
19. Oh, you're from Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Great.
No,
I did my
St. Paul.
PhD over there, so there's nothing there. Only. Come on, 5 years I was in Minneapolis. Beautiful place. Don't worry, I was not kidding. It's really a great place. Too cold, but it's a great place. Anyway, in Manhattan, more than 19,000 people on each square kilometer.
Nice.
19,000.
It's
19.
400 right now. I'm not big.
In Israel, it's only 400. So, nowadays, there's no problem. There's no problem energy-wise, okay? There's no problem with water. Desalination, we have solved that problem, okay? If you are very well organized and you know how to use technologies and you know how to build, skyscrapers and deep into the earth, there are a lot of plans already being devised to be able to take care of such a number. It's not a lot. Nowadays already there are places that are much, much, much more than that. And Israel is not a country, it's a city. Okay? So that's not a great challenge if we will be able, of course, to plan it as best as we can. It's not going to be by itself. Yes.
On the slide for 2019, it said that there was 1.8 million minorities and then 0.43 million others, and I was just wondering who the others are.
Others are people that came to Israel based on the law of return,
Okay.
and they are not Jewish. Most of them are Christians.
Okay.
Okay, and they claim they are Christians, but they came here because one of their, grandparents was Jewish.
Okay.
We have about 400,000 people like this in Israel. Yes.
Have you done any work with people involved in peace talks?
What?
Have you done any work with people involved in peace talks, or have
Of
you
course.
been in conversation with them, and what do they think about your predictions?
Not now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so originally I had another question, but going off Michael, his question, we were talking about how Israel's going to be more of a city than a country. Have you done any research in what the ecological
Of course.
effects and
I'm part of a lot of groups that are trying to
Okay.
plan, devise, understand a lot of things.
and with all these, you know, we keep hearing that the environment's going to collapse soon and all these things. How is that going to work out with more people? Because we keep hearing that the more people there are, the worse the environment.
Okay. I need to answer one of your questions first. I'll answer her question and then remind me your question. I'll give you a story. Okay? 1947. A few months before the Israeli state was established, Ben-Gurion asked one of the statistician of the Jewish agency at the time to come to his office one day. And he asks him the following question. He asks him, go please, do the math in order to understand how many people this piece of land can sustain. We're going to establish a state, we're going to bring Aliyah. How many people this piece of land takes into account water, agriculture, everything? He goes, he crunches the numbers, and he came to Ben-Gurion with a very large pack of papers, and he says, at best, at the year 2000, this piece of land will be able to sustain 1 million people. With the recommendation, I do not recommend to establish a Jewish state. Okay? Thank God Ben-Gurion understood history differently. Okay? Nobody could have imagined that this piece of land by 2020 will sustain 9 million people with such an amazing economy, technology, society, vibrant. Nobody could have imagined. This is the most, unusual dream of people in 1948. That was more than anyone could have imagined. And we are just at the beginning. So this is really a phenomenon. You are just, coming to age to understand what's happening around you. I'm traveling around the world. You cannot even imagine how people are really referring to Israel. By all means, there are a lot of people that really hate this phenomena. But a lot of people are amazed of this phenomenon. Even Israelis don't believe that this is what's happening. Okay? By the way, this is a prophetic phenomena. You know why? Because before we do Birkat Hamazon, there is a piece of Psalms we say. Somebody remembers? שיר המעלות. ושוב השם כבת ציון, היינו כחולמים, like dreamers. אז ימלא שחוק פינו, which means we'll be kidding. This is impossible. Come on. But it says something unusual. אז יאמרו בגויים, הגדיל השם לעשות עם אלה. Which means, the Gentiles would say, wow, God did something unusual with these people. And only then the Jewish would be, הגדיל השם לעשות עמנו. Only after the world really grasp this phenomena, only the Jews would say, oh, this is really amazing. All right, that was a Dvar Torah. Hold on. Before I go, I need to explain something. So what's your name?
Julia.
You are also from Minneapolis? No, all right, fine. Anyway,
Canada, close enough.
Anyway, how come this question is there are only 4 million minorities? Actually, it doesn't grow. It's not growing, that part of Jewish people, of the citizenships here. Now, I'm going to say something based upon understanding systems, not anything else. I don't have data, all right? Only understanding how systems are evolving. If I go and analyze minorities all over the world for millennia in history, what I found is the following. It takes about 3 to 4 generations for a group of minorities until a large group of those minorities decide to be part of the majority. So what I think is that by mid-21st century, some of the minorities in Israel will start, what? Converting to Judaism. It sounds crazy saying it at this point in time. But this is how history is happening. In the US, it's called assimilation.
So when you're saying converting to Judaism, you're looking at like Jewish identity as a national like identity. How would the revenue, like how do you predict that?
We'll come to it. What kind of identities being shaped in Israel in the next century? This is the most important issue I would like to touch upon. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm assuming that the census data, like this thing, doesn't account for Palestinian refugees. How is that?
No. These are citizens.
So do you know how the refugee number, if it's going to grow or?
These are not refugees.
Right, no, I know. But I'm saying for the refugees, is that number also going to increase or is it going to decrease?
It's
like the
most, I don't have time to elaborate on what's happening around Israel.
Okay.
The trends around Israel are not exactly positive.
Okay.
Most of the countries around Israel are dissolving. They are going through a very difficult time in their history. You don't have to be a genius to see it. Things are really not so good for them. The prospects are even very negative. So here we are, something that is happening in the midst of a region that is going amok, going really crazy, and dissolving actually. Nations are dissolving in this region. Anyway, and that's it. Go ahead.
I have a follow-up question to that. Wait, so are we accounting right here for like what is currently considered Israel proper? Like, I'm just confused. I'm not really concerned so much
Israeli
about
citizens.
I'm also concerned so much about but so Israeli citizens, Israelis who are living in the West Bank are also Israeli citizens, but I'm not really concerned so much about like Palestinian refugees who are not like living within the West Bank or Gaza, but like where do those numbers factor in, and like are there also like considerations of like what could potentially happen in the next 80 years?
The Palestinians say that there are about between 6 to 10 million Palestinians that are scattered in the world, that they would like them to come here when they will be able to establish a state. That's a fantasy.
No, but I'm not concerned
Nobody
about the
would
ones
like
who
to
are scattered
come
around
here.
the world.
What?
I'm talking about just like the ones who are currently within these like confines of like this white blob.
What? I'm speaking about just, citizens within the green border, the green line.
So Israelis who are past the green line are also not in this number? Or there?
Jews
Jews are.
Jews that are past the green line are also not in those numbers. Okay? I'm speaking about citizens.
So the demographics are still genuinely, you were saying that like that people have like concerns about the demographics.
Yeah, there is a concern. It's good always to be concerned. That's not a bad thing to be concerned. Okay, go ahead. I feel that they need to clear their mind before going to the real stuff. Go ahead.
Okay, so in your mind, how many Palestinians will be living in Gaza and the West Bank in the year 2100?
I don't have the numbers.
Okay, so that there is a demographic issue.
No, there is no demographic issue. They are not part of the Israeli citizenships. It's not part. They are not part.
Okay, sure.
He doesn't have the data for people that are not part of Israeli citizenship.
You see, with Gaza it's clear already. They are not part of Israel. Very clear. The issue is, what do they want? What do they want? How can we, establish some kind of relationships? That's a political issue. That's not a demographic issue anymore. See what I mean?
What about the West
Now
Bank?
there are, in the West Bank, there are some difficulties because we are intertwined. The people are, it's not an easy thing to detach them and do barriers, even though we are trying to do a barrier. But generally speaking, the Jewish population in Israel is constantly growing. The Palestinian population is in a very great stress. A lot of them are leaving the area. A lot of them, nobody is speaking about it. We think there are about 1.5 million less Palestinians than they claim. And they keep the numbers in order to, to make the issue still in the news, world news. Okay, but here we are part of something, that is going still to be around for at least the next 200 years. We are in a historical epoch. In those epochs, most of the time, conflicts tend to stick for 200 to 300 years until they dissolve somehow, or there is a kind of an agreement. That's it? Okay, let's continue. All right. Now let's see what does it mean. By the way, really, it's an amazing phenomena. You see nations that were trying to eliminate the Jews. What's happening to them in the Israeli and Jewish population? Yes.
First,
stop eating those. That's awful what you're eating.
We're not getting dinner.
Come on. This is bad for your health.
go ahead. You're thinking towards the future.
Yeah.
So one thing, I'm from Minnesota, so Minneapolis.
Oh,
anyway.
great. All right.
But the second more important thing I'm curious about, when you were talking about the world Jewish population, and obviously you mentioned that with assimilation the numbers are shrinking significantly. Is there another factor that's confounding there to make it so it's shrinking so significantly and growing so much in the opposite direction in Israel?
I don't understand.
Why is the number becoming so small outside of Israel and so big within Israel? Is it just assimilation, or is there some other variable?
There's another thing which is called the fertility rate. Okay? I'm going to show it to you. Okay? Fertility rate means how many kids a female is having in her life cycle. Okay, worldwide fertility rate is shrinking behind the replacement rate, which is 2.1 kids. In Israel, we are the only Western culture with a positive fertility rate. The average Jewish female in Israel is having 3.2 kids on average in her life cycle. Alright? In the US, it's about 1.6, 1.5. In Europe, it's 1.2. Awful. Okay? So there are a lot of variables that are, in the making of this phenomena. I didn't touch upon all of them, but this is the thing. I think that gives you some sense of the other variables. All right. So let's try and understand the meaning of this megatrend. Now I'm going to share with you some ideas. I have been working on those ideas in the last few years. I have written a book and I'm still very afraid to publish the book. Okay? I'm going to share with you some ideas. I'm afraid to publish the book because, most of the time in Jewish history, the Jews tend to kill the messenger. So, I'm afraid, and you'll see why maybe, okay? Anyway, I'm going to share with you some ideas. Please stop eating that garbage. I see Coca-Cola. A lot of come on, sugar and salt. What is it? This is Machane Rama. We didn't do those kind of things.
Machane Rama.
So,
Which
You
one?
went?
Which one? Which one?
I was in Wisconsin, I was in Raison, I was in many places. In Wisconsin I was for 20 years, I think. Okay. Are you with me? Actually, I don't care. You eat sugar because I need you now full alert.
Now they were.
All right. Let's try and understand what's happening.
Oh no.
We have to cancel the lecture.
It's dinner
right now.
time.
Yes.
Yeah, on the outside of the room it says on air.
It says it there.
Oh.
I've been watching the timer.
Okay.
Honestly, our lecturers are rather dull.
I'm trying to understand what's happening. In order to understand the challenges and the vectors of this megatrend, I'm going to use a very nice analogy of Marco Polo. Marco Polo, as you know, had a lot of discussions with the king over there in Mongolia, Kublai Khan. One day, Caesar says to ask Marco Polo, "Where are you from?" And our Marco Polo is telling him a story, a very nice story. He says to him, "I'm coming from a city called Octavia. This city is built in the air. And that city is actually being ruled by a lot of suspended huge cables. And what the people of the city are constantly doing is taking care of those cables so that the city will not, collapse and goes to down to earth." A nice analogy which says a lot about how humans are experiencing, their life. I'm going to use this analogy and say the following. Jewish identity, Jewish entity, for the last 2,500 years, experienced that fear of being at the brink of a collapse, a disaster in existence. Okay? However, in the last 2,500 years, the cables that were able to hold our entity were built from 4 types of cables. These are the 4 types of, by the way, there is such a city in Spain. Okay? Beautiful city, Ronda. If you have the chance to go visit. It's really up on the top of hills. It looks like a lot of people are just killing themselves over there. All right. So there are 4 types of huge ropes that hold that entity, which we call the Jewish entity. Now, for the last 2,500 years, those 4 types of ropes, cables, were intertwined together and were strong enough to hold this group of people for the last 2,500 years of hardships in history. However, what happened in the last 200 years is that that rope has begun to how should I say it, to separate into 4 different ropes. Okay? Here are the ropes. I'm trying to be very careful with my terminology. The first rope is that some of us believe that our entity and identity should rely only on the religious aspect of our identity. Without the religious aspect of our identity, we will collapse. If you take it to the extreme, a group of us is saying that without establishing our identity upon the halacha, we will find ourselves in a matter of, very short time, found ourselves collapsing and disappearing in history. That's the first rope. The other rope, the second one, is what we call Judaism, not Jewishness. A group of us have become to understand that only if we will stress and base our identity on ethnicity, on a kind of a grouping of people, and putting aside the halacha, only when we will be establishing our identity on that rope, will be able to survive history. The fourth group of people, or if you wish, 4 rope, says this is the new one in the last 200 years. They say, forget about halacha, forget about culture. We are a group of people that can base their identity upon territory and language. Like there are Francophone and the Anglophone or whatever, there's the Hebraic society. The language is having a very central part of our identity. We don't need halacha, we don't need culture. We need language and territory. Okay, like many other cultures. And there is a 4th rope or 4th group of people that speaks about Israelism. They say we need to be like any other group of people worldwide. It's a civil and national identity. There is no need of any religious or cultural aspect to that identity. There is not even a need of a language. We can decide to speak Spanish. It doesn't matter. Okay? These are the 4 ropes, 4 cables that used to be one huge cable. In the last 200 years, that cable started separating into 4, and each one of us is holding on one rope and believes with all their guts that only the rope that they are, sitting on is the genuine one that will promise to keep the Jewish entity for a very long time in history. And we came to a point in history in which we cannot even discuss, each group cannot even have a clear discussion with the other groups. Now, there are some of us that might find themselves one day on one rope, the other day on another rope. For the last 2,500 years, it was either you were on the rope or you decided to be outside. And in the 19th century, there are now new statistics that speak that in Europe there were about 50% assimilation in the 19th century. A lot of people decided this is too hard for us to be Jewish, and they said, muchas gracias, thank you very much. We don't want to be part of the Jewish people anymore. Okay? So these are the 4 groups. Let me do a very, brief statistics for my interest. Whoever think that the first aspect of our entity is the most important, raise your hand. No one. That's a good thing, all right? That says a lot, by the way. Who says the second one? Okay, we are for about, what, 30%? Okay. Think. I'll give you some time. Think. Okay?
You already started taking.
You already what?
Like,
Can you combine?
What?
Think.
Okay.
Think. You can't. All right. Who says the fourth?
The third.
The third. Excuse me. Okay. 1, 2. Who says the fifth? The fourth? Nobody. So you are somehow here, isn't it?
But can they overlap?
Of course. Sometimes we tend to dance
we're
in
American
between
Jews,
two.
so that knocks out the last two.
Okay.
And we're
American Jews. Okay.
Well,
exactly. Their religion is a civil religion. It's not a halachic religion. Especially their reform movement and the conservative movement. It's a civil religion. That's what most of the people believe. You should. Well, I don't have time to elaborate. Okay, halacha is a different type. It's a little bit differently defined than what the orthodoxy will define halacha.
well, I think that if all of these used to be one web, then they all play on each other. So that even though most of us said Jewish society, I think there's components of the halachic society
You're right.
that created the
Right,
Jewish
but what I'm
society.
saying is the following. During 2,000 years, those 4 things were somehow intertwined.
Yeah, and the other two also.
Okay, and the other 2 also,
They
but
also-
these were more, in our dreams. All right. However, in the last 200 years, something happened in Jewish history, and we started being divided into 4 types of identities. All right. I'm going to show you the statistics, how the Jewish people are divided into those 4 types of folks. Okay? Well, first of all, the challenge is whether we are able to somehow bring those 4 ropes together into one heavy and very strong rope. That's one thing. I don't think we are able anymore to bring together those four ropes. Those ropes are already so far from each other. It will be almost impossible to bring them together. Okay? The issue is whether we are able to devise a new kind of cable, if you wish, that will sustain Jewishness or the Jewish people in the 21st century and beyond.
You have said before, but what do you think caused that separation, that division of the rope?
What caused that division?
Yeah, was it assimilation, enlightenment?
Very simple. Okay, a lot of reasons, but it started in 1910. In 1810. Somebody knows what happened in 1810? 1810. Okay, in 1810 was the establishment of the Reform movement. All right. A large group of people came and said, what is it exactly that rabbinical Judaism? It's not authentic. Okay? For 2,000 years, that was Judaism as we know it was, somehow a rabbinical Judaism. So a large group of people came and said, this is something that is irrelevant anymore. Irrelevant. In 1890, what happened in 1890? The conservative movement was formed. Okay? Now, before that, before the 18th century, it's either you were a halachic Jew or a non-Jew. Very simple. From the beginning of the 18th century, things became much more complex. And now we are at a stage in which how are exactly we're divided in world Jewry in terms of those denominations. Somebody knows how many Orthodox percentage wise?
45.
Out of about 15 million people, how many Orthodox? Percentage wise?
30. 40.
45%.
3 million.
No, they're all going to be secular Jews or Reform in Israel.
About
This is just Israel.
Okay.
This is worldwide.
before up to the 18th century, there were only Orthodox or non-Jew. All right? And there were those that didn't want to be anything, but they were very quiet. Nobody who did anything from that group. In the last century, at least, there were about 10% Orthodox, about 40% conservative, up to 30 years ago, and 30% Reform. Now, I'm going to tell you something that was not published. I heard it from the chancellor of the conservative movement, a very good friend of mine. And I told him, why there's no a publication about it? He said, no, we don't publish those kind of things. What he found is the following. Now, in the US, there are about 10% Orthodox, about 13%, 1-3, Reform, and only 11% conservative. The others don't want to be part of the Jewish people. And actually, if you really want to see the numbers now, there is a new study that was being done. But let's go first to the Israeli population, how they are shaped. This is a very... Huh?
Shrulik.
Shrulik, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Campbell.
This is a very new study that was published a few months ago. And what they found is that there is something unusual going on in the Israeli identity. Because in Israel, at the beginning, there were about 10% Orthodox, about 30% of Israelis were totally detached from Judaism, and there were about 50%, 60% in the middle that it was not an easy thing to define. They called themselves Chilonim. All right? What they have found is something really unusual. What they have found is that something is in the making deep inside the Israeli culture. What they found is that there is 17% that would be defined as Orthodox Jews in Israel. Okay? And there is a great variance in that group. Okay? From Haredim to Dati somehow. Alright? That's 17%. On the other side, those 30% I have mentioned before that used to be really detached from any kind of Jewishness, that group was divided into two groups. About 13%, they called themselves Universalists. They don't want to see anything Jewish in Israel. They hate even Judaism. That's 13%. On top of those 13%, there is about 15% that they don't hate, but they don't want to see anything Jewish in Israel. They would like to separate, דת ומדינה, church and state. Those are the 30% somehow they remain there. But the most interesting that is really going on now in Israel is what we call the 55% Israeli Jews. This group is shaping in a way that is very interesting. They would like to observe Judaism. They don't want a halachic state. They want this nation to have a very clear Jewish identity. Okay? They tend to do a lot of traditions and rituals and ceremonies, and there is a new blend of nationalism and Jewishness. And this is what is going probably to grow in Israel and going to shape a new kind of Jewish nationalism. Go ahead, she was first. Okay?
This is interesting because we were talking about a few weeks ago how the average young Israeli is shifting more to the right politically, like on the political spectrum of Israeli politics. And I was wondering if you think that there's a correlation here or any type of connection.
There is a correlation.
Okay.
Okay, I have written about it. I'm trying to understand what exactly the politicians of the last round of elections have missed.
Mm-hmm.
They missed this group.
Right.
There were those that spoke to this group, those that spoke to those two groups.
Mm-hmm.
The middle, only the Likud at this point is somehow interacting with.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now this is Israel. Now let me show you the US. Okay? A very new study done by Pew. Now what they did is something unusual. It's not exactly. It was not done for the Jewish people. It was done to understand the different religious archetypes in the U.S. Society, and they came with a very nice typology. They did a typology of 7 stages of religiosity. Okay? What they found is a very common Gauss curve. You are all familiar with the Gauss curve. Okay? They found the following. Generally speaking, in different religions in the US, there are 3 types of religious people. The highly religious people, about 39%, and this group also is divided into 3 subgroups. The somehow religious, this group is divided into 2 subgroups, and there is the non-religious people that this is divided into 2 subgroups. But generally speaking, what they found is that there is about 39% very religious in the US society, in different kinds of religions, about 32% in the middle, and about 30% at the other side. The non-religious, they don't want to see any kind of religion, etc., etc. Now this is the average religious people in the US, in any kind of religion. What they have found is something really amazing regarding the Jews in the US. An anomaly. Here's what they found. They found that in the Jewish people, the groups are divided very differently. They found that about 17% of the US Jewry is actively religious and very religious. 17%. Okay? About 8% at the middle. Okay? And whoa! about 42% don't want to have anything with Judaism. They have already detached themselves from the Jewish community. They even hate religion. So this is something huge that is happening in the U.S. Jewish identity, and it's going to have a lot of implications. It's already having a lot of implications. By the way, most of the time, this group of people is already against Israel, and it's very, out loud in whatever they are doing. Even the BDS is coming from that group. Okay, so their understanding is that Israel is a sin. It's a human sin. Now, and it's going, of course, to this group is the cause of very hard relationships that are emerging between Israeli Jewry and the American Jewry. These two groups somehow hold the communities, but they are shrinking. And that has a lot of implications. I'm not studying exactly these kinds of groups and how they are going to affect the identity in the future. I'm more into understanding what's happening here, but I hope there will be some publications that will take care of this phenomena and explain it and try to see the vectors of this phenomena. As far as I know, nobody has touched this last study to try really to understand how it's going to play out. For 30 years ahead, a century ahead, that it's going to be huge. But you see what's happening, you see the large picture. For 2,500 years, the center of Judaism was in the diaspora, and about 2 years ago, the center becomes Israel. And it's growing. By mid-21st century, will be about 65% of world Jewry in Israel. By the end of the 21st century, more than 80% of world Jewry in Israel, which means in a matter of 200 years, from the establishment of the Zionist movement, history is going to be totally different. How it's going to affect all of us, I'm going to give you one hint, and then we'll discuss it, if you wish. Otherwise, we'll say bye, I'll see you in the future. Okay, the first challenge. Can we weave a new relationships between those 2, 3, 4 ropes in order to form new kind of ties between those groups? This is a great challenge, a huge challenge. Personally, I think we missed the train already. There's no way to bring them back. We need to define a new kind of rope that will sustain Jewish identity or entity in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 centuries at least. We have started a new epoch in Jewish history. C'est tout. The time of the diaspora has ended. Whether we like it or not, whether it's good or not, we don't have any say yet. It's already in the making. It's already in a huge vector. It will be impossible to stop. Impossible. Unless, God forbid, really, we will get here 500 nuclear bombs and will disappear. It will not happen, believe me. Okay? So, this is the first challenge. The other challenge is much more attainable. In order to explain it, I'll do it in a very brief way. We call it, what's the raison d'être of Israel as a center of Judaism for the next centuries. Raison d'être. Okay? If I am to, to a little bit explain it in a very simple way, I will take two terms. One is the covenant of faith, and the other is the covenant of destiny. These are terms of Rabbi Soloveitchik from religious aspect and taking them into the national aspect of our existence. Israel was established upon a covenant of faith. Different groups, different types of people, different denominations came together and said, let's forget about what we want to see as a future Jewish state. Let's first, bring all our efforts together to establish a homeland in which our horrible past will not at least repeat itself. That was the Zionist movement. All right? At the beginning, very few believe that it's possible. You and me, somehow, I don't know why, we are observing its success. We have established a place that whoever wants to mess with us better be careful. Okay? That's the covenant of faith. Now, if you go and analyze different kinds of entities worldwide during history, you see that there were a lot of groups that were defined based on that process. What you find is something even frightening. You find that it takes about 3-4 generations until the glue that hold different groups around that raison d'être dissipates. Most of the time it dissipates and there are assassinations of leaders and a civil war. In that process, people start really clarifying not where are you coming, from where we're coming, but where are we heading to? And they start devising a covenant of destiny, which means what is it exactly that drives our existence? What do we want to establish, to achieve in history as a group? I'll give you a few examples. Take, for example, the US, raison d'être. Most of the time it's 2-3 words. And around those 2-3 words, 98% of the different groups combine together and start working for it. Most of the time, around those 2-3 words, we establish a constitution. Around those words, we establish, institutes, etc., and we go to wars even in history. What's the U.S. raison d'être? 2 words. What? 2 words.
Democracy.
No.
Religious freedom.
What? No.
Life and liberty.
No. So simple. What was really...
Melting pot.
No. It's so simple, but it's so strong. Think about it. 200, 300 years ago, it was really a prophecy. Something that did not exist in the world. And the US is still debating exactly what are the boundaries, etc. Constantly debating things. Okay? Somebody knows The French, raison d'être.
Liberty, equality, fraternity.
Very nice. Liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Yeah, I took it.
Okay, 3 words. The French always complicate things, but that's something else. Okay? The EU, it's another form, and it's another kind of grouping that is establishing a new entity.
Is it like the 4 freedoms, like movement, work, labor?
No.
Like, things like that?
They did not decide upon it yet.
Okay.
Okay? But when they will decide upon it, it was established. The EU was established, started to be established at the end of the World War II, isn't it? How many people died in World War II? Somebody knows?
60 million.
No, 72 million people. 2/3 civilians. So they were shocked. So they said, let's stop being, different countries. Let's start merging. We'll do it step by step. Okay, at the beginning, just trade, agreements. At the end, we'll have a common matbea. Matbea is currency, etc., etc. But they know that they need to establish a covenant, a raison d'être. So there's something on the table. They are still debating it. When they will decide, you'll see it, marked on the euro everywhere in Europe. I'm going to show you what's on the table. Here's what's on the table. It's called unity in diversity. Okay? So the idea is, what might be, okay, a raison d'être for a Jewish entity in the land of Israel with a large group of minorities, an entity that is modern enough, an entity that can bring a new idea to the world and establish a new covenant among the different groups and actually define a new entity to what we call nowadays Israel. This is the challenge that is upon the door of your generation. My generation was the covenant of faith. Establish a state in which we will be secure enough that no one will mess with us. It's not easy. It's very, very, very hard. And we are paying a lot of prices. Your generation will need to come up with an idea that is huge enough, simple enough, clear enough, that all the groups will accept it as something that might be our I don't have any other words. Raison d'être. If you have another word for me, let me know. Okay? I believe this is a great challenge that is on your table. Your generation will have to do it. In order to do it, you need to understand in Jewish history, in Jewish tradition, in world affairs, in world trends, in new ideas that are evolving worldwide, and do a mixture, something new that will resonate not just to your generation, but to at least 500 years in the future. And it will be so so new, but so simple, with which we'll be able to come even to our neighbors and say, this is what we are. You should accept us. At this point, we say, we want to have a Jewish state. The minute after we say that, the Arabs will say, what's exactly a Jewish state? Define what's a Jewish state. You know, Bibi raised the bars to heavens. He said to the Palestinians, if you will not accept us as a Jewish state, we will not deal with you and have any kind of discussions about any peace accord. And the Palestinians immediately says, what's a Jewish state exactly? Define Jewish state. So we need to define what's a Jewish state, a modern state, a very advanced, a very, with of course a lot of minorities and different types of Jews with different kinds of halacha even. Well, the most creative idea of the last century was Zionism. It was not a new idea, but the idea was, you know, what the Zionist movement said is actually so simple but so powerful. They said, for 2 millennia we were praying for the return to our nation, to our place. It didn't help. Praying doesn't help. So let's take a modern tool, which is called world diplomacy. And with that tool, we'll establish a homeland so that our cruel faith, cycles of violence that define the Jewish people during the last 2 millennia will cease to exist. At least that. It was so clear, so nice, one word. And we were able to bring together a lot of forces, different kinds of ideas, into doing something unusual. Your generation needs to come up with one word, 2 words that will bring together totally different parties. It needs to resonate from our tradition. It needs to resonate from some kind of understanding how humanity is evolving. It needs to bring the past, the present, the future together in a manner that from the Haredim to the Shmutznikim will accept it and will say, wow, this is great. Let's work for it. It's not easy. It's actually a new creation. If you wish, for the last 3,500 years, somehow from Avraham Avinu, we were waiting to this point in history, to be born at least. We were in the womb for 3,500 years, and we are going to emerge, whether we like it or not. Some of us will be part of it, some of us will not. Some of us will understand what's happening, some others will reject it. This is how history is evolving. At least demographically, we reached a point that our forefathers and foremothers dreamed about for millennia. In my book, if you remember, I mentioned my book. I'm coming with an idea what kind of raison d'être should be. It's a complicated idea, and I'm having a hard time explaining it in a very, simple way. And probably that's the reason why it will not hold. Okay? But at least I'm trying. But I know that I am Dora Midbar. You know what's Dora Midbar in English? The transition generation. My mind is too heavy. I was not brought in freedom like your generation. I was brought in different places in the world, and I felt what anti-Semitism is. I was part of wars over here, and I'm still trying to feel secure. And that's why my mind is imprisoned in the past, even though I'm a futurist. Okay? I will not touch upon, explain it, but if you wish, here you have an idea in front of you. Okay? What I would like to finish with is, who's going to lead this epoch in Jewish history? Are you tired already? Should I stop? Yes. They are tired. But let me, push it a little bit more, 2-3 minutes, okay? Can you hold with me 2-3 minutes? It was too heavy, I understand. Hello?
We can do it.
You can do it?
Yeah, we can.
Sure, you need some sugar? This part is full of sugar, but that's what's happening with sugar. You eat sugar, you have 30 minutes high, and then you go down. That's why you should not take any sugar.
Between 6 and 8 is dinner time.
All day?
Yeah, we did eat all that.
We had one meal time.
We ate it all over.
Okay, let me sum up with the following. Okay? What I found is that there were 4 phases in Jewish history up to now. We are at the end of the 4th phase in history. And we just about to begin the 5th epoch. First epoch was, if you wish, the forefathers and foremothers. You have the timing over there. Everything we have learned in our tradition comes from their behavior. They were the authority, the religious authority, the economic authority, they were everything. Okay? What I found is that each epoch took about 500 years. At the end of each epoch, there were about 200 years in which there was a lot of tension between the groups that formed the Jewish people. And at the end of each epoch, there was a disaster, from which we emerged to a different kind of peoplehood, with a new narrative, a new kind of leadership, a new kind of ideas. Almost everything was new. So this is the first epoch. It was ended by horrible acts that each tribe did to another tribe. Until, even though the Bible said, be careful not to have a kingdom or a king upon you, the Jews, the tribes, came to Samuel and said to him, please put on us a king that will be able to bring the parties together. At the beginning, Shmuel, Mashach, anointed. Anointed. Okay? Mashiach. Sell. Okay? Shaul was a very liberal king. He said, you do whatever you want in your tribes. We will bit by bit establish, a common entity. In a matter of few years, came a revolutionary young person. His name was David. He said, this is not the way to establish the Jewish people. We need to establish a center, a religious center, economic center. Everything needs to be centered in one place. And with cunning actions, he was able, by force by the way, to bring the tribes to leave whatever they were used to do in their tribes and establish a center that bit by bit became an amazing phenomena that his offspring Solomon established in a manner that people from around the world came to see what he did. However, 30 years only after Solomon passed away, we started 200 years of civil wars between the tribes. 7 civil wars were in a matter of 200 years. At the end, 10 tribes said, this is not what we think we would like to be part of. And they have detached themselves from the Jewish people. The forgotten 10 tribes, we call them. Okay? So the second epoch was defined by kings. Kingdom, the mindset of a kingdom. The king was the religious authority, the economic authority, everything.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused about what you said about the 10 tribes being lost. I thought it was that the Assyrians came in and spread them across.
That's the narrative we used to see. But a lot of them said, we don't want to be part of it. Okay, if you study the Tanakh, you'll see that the offspring of Solomon were trying to be very harsh on the tribes, and the tribes actually revolted against Shevet Binyamin and Shevet Yehuda.
So it's like the historical account versus the biblical?
The narrative.
Okay.
Okay? Anyway, so that's the king. At the end, even the kings became very cruel, very corrupt. Until Jeremiah came and said, this is not it's not working. And he says, let's leave Israel. Let's go to exile. Regroup and come back. And they accused him of being leftist. They put him in jail, etc., etc., etc. And then came a disaster. The first temple was destroyed and the Jews were exiled, most of them to Babylon. About 1.5 million people went to Babylon. 38 years later, okay, there was a king named what? You are not into history, I see. All right.
Cyrus.
Cyrus?
Yeah.
מה זה Cyrus?
Koresh.
כן, Cyrus the Koresh. All right. Okay, and said, okay, this is the time to go back to Israel. Who wants to go back? How many came? How many said, okay, we are willing to go back to Israel out of 1.5 million people?
40,000.
40,000. The others said, come on, Israel? This is not a place to be. Israel? You're nuts. Even the Talmud, Yerushalmi, was not considered something important. We are the Jewish people here in Babylon. This is the place. This is Manhattan. Okay? And then of course, the type of leadership that emerged in the third epoch, somebody would like to try? Who were they? The priests. Okay? And they tried to establish a new form of a Jewish people. With the family that was also Kohanim, they were priests. Who are this family? Mishpachat? Hashmonai. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to stretch it a little bit so that we'll finish. And then also at the end, very corrupt. Not just corruption. From their corruption of the priest emerged a new religion that was cruel to us for the last 2,000 years? The what? Christianity. And then we started the fourth epoch after the destruction of the rabbis. Exactly. And we are at the end of the fourth epoch in the last 200 years. During the last 200 years, there were a lot of transformations, a lot of groups emerged, a lot of tension among groups in Jewish, and different denominations that did not exist. However, we reached a point in history in which the largest Jewish community resides in Israel. In about 4 years, will be 50% of all Jewry will reside in Israel, and we are going to start a new epoch in Jewish history. Halakha is going to change. People don't know it. And I can give you a lot of examples what kinds of things need to change just because we are 50% before Jewry in Israel. Halachically, from the halakha, from within the halakha. And the most important thing is who are going to be the leaders of the fifth epoch. Those leaders need to come with new ideas that will solve the challenges of the fourth epoch. What?
Could you give an example of things that you think have to change within halakha?
I don't have time.
Okay.
Okay, a lot of things.
Could you give like one example?
One example?
Like a highlight.
A highlight. Okay. There is in the halacha a term called Rov Yoshvea Alea. The halacha says the following: when 50% plus one person of the Jewish people will reside back in Israel, the halachot, the oraita, needs to go back to be the oraita. For example, okay, you know what's Yuvel? Jubilee?
Yeah.
We need to do Jubilee again, halachically.
Sorry, I can't search the web on Apple Watch.
That was a good one. You see, so can we do it Jubilee now? You know what doesn't need Jubilee?
Like every 7.
Every 49 years. For 49 years, not Shmita, 7 years, even Shmita, we need to go to do it in the Oraita. We cannot anymore, do a lot of tricks in order to be able to have food. We have totally to. So a lot of things, really, halachically, we need to change. And we have just started. So the idea is who's going to lead it. So, somebody would like to try? Who's going to lead it?
We all are. We are. The Knopf show.
It needs to
Today's
be,
students, tomorrow's leaders.
It needs to be a different kind of a mindset. A different kind of mindset. I'll give you just a hint. What I found is that each epoch there were two groups of elites that were in tension to who's going to lead. What I found is each group of that was not on the top in the next epoch took over the helm and led the Jewish people. So here at this epoch, kings were not the favorites. And then they became the leaders. During the king's epoch, the priests were not the favorites. And then they took over. During the priesthood epoch, the rabbis. So who was during the rabbinical era, who was not part of the leadership?
Women.
Women, exactly.
Ah. Full circle, baby.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I was trying to do it, in a couple hours. It's not an easy thing. It was so heavy, too heavy actually. But I tried to do my best. Any question? Otherwise, go eat your chocolate.
Thank you. I
just want to thank you for talking to us about the future of Jewish people and the Israeli state
varied and discussing things with us that I think a lot of us have never thought about or even considered. This has been very mind-blowing and eye-opening, and I think a lot of us are going to have a lot of thoughts in the next couple of hours about what we just discussed. And we thank you for talking to us and dealing with our horrible eating habits.
Thank you.
We are, again, I want to thank Dr. Passig. It's, we've actually done this in, we were supposed to do it in 2 hours, we did it in 4 hours. And there's a lot of math that gets covered in this. But it's, as we said when we started the day, we were able to really start with history with Professor Reamer and see the historical context of some of the work that we hope that many of you will do in North America. And to be able to end the day and sort of have this vision of not just what will be in America, but what will be here in Israel. And that really will, I think for many people, how you understand Israel and your relationship with Israel will also help you better understand what's going on in the diaspora 15 or 20 years from now, as each of you, the majority are women here, but lead the communities of North America. So again, toda rabba to Dr. Passig for giving us the time. We are going to, as we walk down, we'll go back to the main. You can use the bathrooms here in the building. Grab something to drink. We'll call the bus and it'll pick us up hopefully at the exact point where it dropped us off. It'll take it a couple of minutes to get there. That's 5 or 10 minutes to get down there. Anyways, so let's just stay together. Don't leave the building until we're all together because people want to use the bathrooms. You can take the elevators down to it's to -1. If you're in the elevator, it's -1. So the bathrooms are, and as we'll exit, just remember there's still classes going on.
I could fuck up her tomorrow.
Exactly. Actually, real world cannot be